Thank you, and now introducing Claudia and Laurie.
Thank you. Are our mics on? Oh, I can hear it. How about you?
It sounds that way.
Yes. Hi, hi,
Wonderful.
Claudia.
Hi.
I'm so glad to be here with you. I love your book.
Thank you so much.
So, Claudia, I don't know, you did a little reading, but I wanted to say there was a starred Kirkus review. It called Lucky Red, a shining example of what an old-fashioned page-turner can accomplish, a welcome remix of a Western novel, a queer Western that feels both fresh and timeless. So, bravo. I know there are some people who've read the book already or in the middle of reading it for the book club. We won't have any spoilers, though, because the plot is, as good, if not better, than the dazzling writing. So, Claudia's going to read a selection, and then we'll begin.
Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you, Laurie. Thank you to everybody who's been working so hard to put this together. I really appreciate it. For those of you who haven't read the book, Lucky Red is the story of 16-year-old Bridget and her journey from forlorn orphan to successful sex worker to revenge-seeking gunfighter. Every Western features a working girl with a heart of gold, and her job is usually to help somebody else have an adventure. But in Lucky Red, she gets to tell her own story in her own words, and she falls in love with a badass lady bounty hunter. And then when everything goes crazy, she and her two best friends have no choice but to saddle up and ride out and sort everybody out themselves. So I'm going to read a selection from the beginning of part 2 of the book, about 100 pages in. Autumn that year was mostly warm spells broken up by fits of stormy weather. Like a child throwing a fit, the skies would drop buckets of rain or odd little snow flurries, then heat up to make the streets run with mud that would harden into ruts like cobblestones in a city racked by earthquakes. The whole town was off-kilter from being jerked back and forth, and it seemed everyone wanted to shake off the pall of uncertainty with as much drinking, gambling, and whoring as their time and purse would allow. The fall storms were unwelcome to cattle drivers and homesteaders, but each one packed the queen with men who wanted to shelter from the night, surrounded by warm and smiling company. Roscoe would bang away at his favorites, and every few minutes the door would swing open, gusts of wind blowing in some fellow who'd stand there stamping and blowing like a steer, looking astonished that he wasn't the only one who'd had the idea that a saloon was a better place to hide from a storm than a tent or a damn sod house. They all complained relentlessly about the cold and damp while they steamed in their coats and Bart ladled out his Sunday brew, the noxious mix of odds and ends that he stirred together with molasses and tea every Sabbath and sold for 10 cents a glass to anyone willing to find out what was in it. Fresh clouds had been gathering all day. Knowing it would be a long and repetitive evening, I slipped out the front door to take a breath and watch the storm come in. The wind snatched my breath right out of me, but I didn't care. I'd come to love the cold, the way it sliced right through my clothes to prickle at my skin, the way it rushed past me incapable of caring. Back in Fort Smith, there'd been a woman who'd steal anything she came across. The postmaster's pencil, buttons on the shop counter, worn-out horseshoes, they all just jumped into her hand as if pulled by a magnet. Everyone knew it was a kind of madness, as she'd had 4 boys, a husband, and 2 brothers go off with General Lee and not one come home, and the townfolk tried to be patient with her. All the same, it was aggravating, and so every now and then someone would call the sheriff and she'd get drug off to jail for a few days, where she'd cry until that too became aggravating and the deputy would let her out with a stern warning. I thought of her sometimes in Dodge, where the wind was the same as she had been, unthinking, unwanting, just snatching at everything, wailing at nothing. It was movement that could not be stopped because it had no goal and neither ending nor beginning. The changes that the wind brought to the sky were some of the most beautiful things I'd ever seen. Great billowing clouds that seemed as though nothing could ever induce them to move would be suddenly swept aside, pulled carelessly across the sky like a gambler raking in his winnings. Then, out of nowhere, the reeling, endless blue would be scudded up with high wisps that threw the heaven's depth into terrifying relief. But the storms, those were truly magnificent. The sky's color changing to iron gray for thunder, pearly translucent white for snow, or feverish frog belly green before a twister, though I'd only seen that once. I've never felt more sure of the existence of God than I did in those moments, watching him prepare to deliver some fresh chaos into our lives. I shivered where I stood. It had gone white earlier this afternoon, which was how we knew a blizzard was coming, first of the year, and early, for it was but October. But now the clouds were finally gathering, piling up stern and sharp-edged just outside of town. From the far end of the street came a train whistle, no doubt telling anyone still working to hurry it up and finish loading so the cargo could get to Chicago and the loaders to the saloons before the sky broke open. I looked up instinctively. I don't think there's anyone on this earth who can ignore a train whistle. And then I saw them. Astride a big bay mare came a rider in a heavy canvas coat buttoned up high to the collar, hat pulled low against the wind so that no face was visible. A rope, secured on one end to the saddle horn, was wrapped around the wrists of a man on the other, tying him into his seat on a dun gelding. The man and his horse both looked defeated. The man was hunkered into himself as far as he could get, and when a fresh blast of wind came barreling down the street, he scrunched up tighter. I'd seen plenty of marshals, posses, and even a few enterprising citizens bringing bandits into town before, and they usually weren't worth much interest until they chose an establishment in which to dispose of their reward money. But something about this captor caught my attention, and I could not look away. Maybe it was the ease with which such a small person, for the lead rider looked fairly light-boned under all those layers, rode such a large horse, or that the quarry looked so thoroughly licked. Or maybe I just knew, from all the way down the street, that in a town full of novelties, this really was something new.
Bravo. So the writing is so beautiful, and in case it wasn't clear, this novel takes place in Dodge City in 1877, and most of it takes place in a place called the Buffalo Queen Saloon, run by two women, Lila and Kate, and it is the only female-run bordello, if we can call it that, in the city. So it is really a rollicking good time, besides being beautifully written, and that's our first glimpse of one of the main characters, Spartan Lee, who we will totally talk about. But I just want to say, a Western, what a brilliant idea. I've never read a book like this before, and that's what we were talking about in the audience as well. So how did you choose to write a Western?
First, thank you so much. I sort of came to Westerns a little later. I didn't really grow up watching them, and I never found much to relate to in like the sort of John Wayne vision of Westerns. I just sort of didn't see a place.
Me either.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, you know, it's not for everybody.
Yeah.
And then as I got older, I started encountering some more sort of like, some sort of alternate Westerns. I think the first one that really caught my attention was the film McCabe and Mrs. Miller, which is also about a brothel in the West. But I think what really drew me to the genre was partly a little bit of nostalgia. Although I didn't grow up with Westerns, I did grow up with Little House on the Prairie, which I read obsessively as a grade schooler and reenacted with all of my friends many times. And so there was that, but mostly what I find really wonderful about this genre and this time and place is this wonderful contrast between this scope for like huge emotional arcs. People find out who they really are, they reinvent themselves, they discover whole new modes of being, and that is contrasted with this incredibly demanding physical reality, where like, sure, you can find out who you really are as a person, but if you can't shoot a gun and ride a horse and build a fire, you're gonna die. So that tension, I think, is just so fascinating.
Yeah, and that tension is definitely throughout the book. So in the New York Times review, they said you pay homage to like Mark Twain, Zane Grey, and Cormac McCarthy. So that's a pretty wide range. I thought even in that I could hear the tension of your influences, right?
Thank you.
Did you read like Mark Twain and Cormac McCarthy while you were? Because one is an adventure and one is kind of like apocalyptic. So.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I read Blood Meridian as a college lit major, and it just blew my mind. It was, you know, that book goes hard. So I think like I was thinking about that a little bit. Yeah, I was thinking about Mark Twain. To be honest, the novel, the Western novels that had the most influence on me are Lonesome Dove and
Yeah.
True Grit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those were the ones that I read and reread the most, like in the lead up to working on this book. And I mean, and Lonesome Dove is my favorite novel. I probably read it once a year.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And the journeys, right? The Western has in it a journey.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so you take this Western, it's kind of like, I think of your book kind of as a twist on the Western because of you have the gay characters, the queer characters, but also a little bit of a twist on a romance, and it's also a little bit of a coming of age as well, right? So we have your 16-year-old Bridget, who has a great voice, by the way. One of my favorite lines is right at the beginning. I mean, I was drawn right in, and I talked to people who said they were too. Before I was a whore in Kansas, I was a poor drunkard's daughter in Arkansas. I mean, that's such a good line. And she's a sporting woman, a prostitute, right? And she really is an innocent abroad sort of character. So tell us about how you came up with her as a person and how you envisioned her. I mean, she's a little way an anti-hero because she keeps making terrible decisions for herself, right? But we love her anyway.
Yeah. I mean, that's the experience I want people to have with Bridget. She's a 16-year-old girl in love. That's one of the most destructive things in the universe.
Yeah.
First love is horrifying. It tears your world apart in the best possible way. But the experience I want everybody to have with Bridget is to just like want to hug her and shake her at the same time, and the whole book be like, oh, sweetheart, oh, sweetheart, oh, baby, baby. Like it just because everything she's so impulsive. And everything she does, it's like, please don't do that, but also like, what else are you gonna do?
Yeah, yeah. And she's Lucky Red.
She is incredibly lucky. Like, despite all the bad things that happen to her, she is always in the corner of her eye is the scenario where it is so much worse.
Yeah. So when did you realize that you would be a queer character? From the beginning?
That was always the beginning.
Yeah.
You know, I started, she was not the first character that I came up with.
Spartan Lee.
Spartan
right?
Lee was the first, the love interest was this badass lady bounty hunter was the first character
Who
I came
is
up with.
that is the person who rides in with the body on the horse in the scene that Claudia just read, right?
Yeah.
First glimpse of her love.
Exactly, and I just wanted to think of like the coolest, sexiest badass I could think of, and I think I pitched her to a friend of mine as like, you know, like Han Solo, but a really hot queer woman. And she was like, oh yeah, I'd read that.
Well, they did a good job. Has everyone seen, hold up the cover, look at, can you see the cover if you don't already have it one handy? The cover, the paperback cover, she does look like Han Solo, but a really good queer woman. So Spartan Lee was first, so maybe we should talk about Spartan Lee and how she wrote into your imagination.
Yeah, like I said,
just like that?
Just like that. Basically, yeah, just like that. I wanted to come up with the coolest person I could think of, and then I was like, all right, I love ultimate badasses, but ultimate badasses don't make good protagonists. It dilutes their power.
Right.
So whose life can she totally mess up?
Right.
And I tried a few different things, and then I landed on Bridget, and I wanted Bridget to be this sort of innocent, but not totally, like, when she gets to Dodge City and she starts doing sex work at the Buffalo Queen brothel, she's very jaded about most of life. You know, she has been taking care of her alcoholic father for most of her life. She's taken this hard journey to get to Dodge City. So she already knows about like taking care of herself and working for a living and how like all the difficulties that come with that, and so she thinks she knows it all, and then she falls in love.
Yeah, I like that when she becomes a prostitute, or as she calls it, a working girl, right? A sporting woman, sporting woman, right? I like that it's not, there's no morality involved. I mean, it's eat or die, right?
Yeah.
It's work. And I was watching you on some of your other interviews, and you talked about wanting to represent prostitutes as hardworking women, which I think was really interesting. Can you talk about how did you do that and how did you do that research? Because I imagine the research was fun.
The research was fun. I'm actually kind of a terrible researcher.
Uh-huh.
I mean, the minute it starts to feel like school, I'm like, screw this, I'm going outside. But as far as like the choice to do the representation that way, you know, what I saw, you know, a lot of my research was very visual. I watched a lot of stuff. I looked at a lot of old, like, archival material, like visual stuff. But I did some reading about sex work in the Old West, and one of the things that came through and really stuck with me was that while the respectable, good women of society, the wives and everything, looked down on sex workers, for women who were doing high-end sex work, that disdain was totally mutual, where these women who were working in these like high-class places were like, why would I want what you have? Like,
Right. Well, and you have a really good showdown scene between the prostitutes and the town women. And is it in the book, or did I hear you talk about it, the way that the prostitutes just think, well, we're just selling ourselves in one way.
yeah.
And you're selling yourself in another way.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. The sex workers are looking at these married women going like, at least I'm making money out of this.
And at least I'm free.
And I'm free and I can come and go as I please. Like, you're having sex for free and he owns you body and soul. Like,
Right, which was really true back then.
it was really true.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to approach sex work simply as a job. You
Yes.
know, I feel like
Yes.
there's definitely a version of Lucky Red that could be a workplace comedy. You know, like Parks and Rec, but maybe sex work.
Completely be a film.
Yeah.
Absolutely be a film. And there are a lot of film people in Montclair, so.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, because, you know, they're professionals, they're skilled professionals,
Yeah.
and they know that they have a good version of their job, and anybody who's ever had a service job knows that a good version of a service job is really worth hanging on to, and doing well at. And so they're good at what they do,
Yeah.
and they know that they're good at what they do, and
And it's kind of like acting, and you
Yeah.
kind of even have her just compare it to that at one point as well. Just putting on a good show.
yeah, just put
Yeah.
on a good show, or there's a moment when, you know, Bridget's seeing a man out of her room, and in the next room, her friend Constance is seeing a man out of her room, and as soon as the man walks by, she sees her friend go from like,
Yeah. Yeah, and there's no reason to feel sorry for any of these women. They're living good lives, and they have a lot of self-respect, I felt, and they're survivalists. Also.
yeah, they're pragmatic. The one thing that comes through no matter what amount or type of research you do about the West is that pragmatism wins every time.
Yeah, right. She just has to eat, and so she does what she does. So Spartanly, the badass, sexiest character you can think of, and you match her with this innocent abroad. And she came to you first, you said, and then you just wanted to decide, you know, how to deal with her. So she's a really fun character. Did you like her? How did you feel about her? Because we all like
Yeah.
Bridget, but how did you feel about Spartan?
I don't think Spartanly is for liking, I think she's for wanting.
Oh, that's good, that's good. Yes,
Yeah.
certainly for Bridget she is.
Exactly, and Bridget is sort of tangled up in the like, do I want you or do I want to be you, which is always the question in the steamiest crushes.
Yeah, she's like the bad boy.
She's the bad boy.
She's the bad boy who you want to get in bed with, but good Lord, you don't want to
But yeah.
spend a life with. But she does have somebody, you do even have a little love triangle. Poor Jim Bonnie.
Oh, poor Jim Bonnie. You know,
So,
it's just,
The sheriff, I mean,
he's
every
in over
good.
his head. He doesn't even realize
Right.
he's in over his head, and he is.
Yeah, but he has no idea what the situation really is, right? And he never really does. He's kind of clueless. So he's the sheriff on the scene to make sure that things in the saloon don't get out of control. And he's a very well-drawn character. I felt
Oh, thank
a little
you.
sorry for him as a secondary character. He was very round. He was not a flat character.
Thank you.
And he does a lot of interesting things. So let's go back to the research for a bit. You said because the book is so visual and tactile, and your mom. What role did your mom play for you for the research?
Yeah. I think, you know, to your point of visual and tactile, I think for me the point of research is to make the world of the novel feel real. because, you know, that's where we live our lives,
Yeah.
right? Is in the
Yeah.
texture of our clothes and the taste of our coffee. Like,
Right.
that's
And
where
the
you live
tea,
and die.
the tea.
And all their tea.
They're
and-
kicking back tea because it looks like booze, is that
Yeah,
why
it
they're
looks like
throwing
whiskey,
that?
which is a historical thing that, sex workers and dance hall girls would all, when the house poured for them, they get a shot glass full of just cold tea, which, you know, yeah, serves the dual purpose of, like, you can't get drunk on the job, like, they're working,
Yeah,
and it's great, you gotta stay up all night.
yeah, oh, yeah.
So it does both. But so as far as research, you know, I did do a lot of visual research and I looked at old Sears and Roebuck catalogs. I watched a lot of historical, like, TVs and movies.
That must have been fun.
It was so fun. And then the amazing resource that I also had on hand was my mom,
Yeah.
who she's trained as a costume designer and has this encyclopedic knowledge of historical American clothing. So I would be watching like Deadwood or something and screen capping out just like stills of people and sending them to her on our text chain, because this was all during lockdown.
This is your COVID novel.
This is my COVID novel.
Wow. As adventurous as you can get from your, from your apartment or your kitchen table.
Well, I would say, yeah, exactly. You know, I would knock off from my day job and be like, God, I wish I could go out and get a drink, but I know one bar that's open.
Oh my God, that's awesome! Wow.
But yes, I would like screen grab all of these just shots of people, and then I would send them to my mom and be like, okay, like, what's the texture of this jacket?
Yeah.
What's, what are these pants made out of? Like, is this gonna be itchy? Is the dye gonna run when they wash their dresses? And then she would like send me all these really interesting tidbits. She was like, the Cowboys weren't wearing jeans yet. Who knew? It was still a San Francisco thing.
And the prostitutes are all wearing a red dress.
Yeah, they're
all
all
wearing
red dresses.
So that the madams who run the saloon can kind of look and make sure they're all doing their jobs. They couldn't hide either. And I guess it also telegraphed. But they were the only women in the place, really.
Yeah,
Right?
for sure.
Yeah.
But also, the other thing that I learned growing up with a costume designer who's also a self-made cinephile is how to think about the clothes that characters are wearing as like a part of a tool in your storytelling toolbox. So there's a whole color story in the way that people are dressed.
Yeah.
Bridget starts out in her pale pink dress when she arrives in town, and then she wears bright red for her work. And then in the last act, she's in black and purple, so she's in this light to dark transformation.
Wow.
And then the madams always wear dark red, because they're sort of on that same spectrum, but further along. You know, when they leave the Buffalo Queen, they wear green and blue.
Very cinematic.
Yeah,
I didn't notice the color coordinated transformation. That's really cool.
Thank you. And then like the men are always wearing brown so that they will literally fade into the background, because compared to each other, the girls are not at all interested in these guys.
Well, they do kind of all merge together.
They just blend together.
Yeah.
They're just customers. Like.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, you grew up in a cinematic kind of family.
Yeah.
You grew up in California. So tell us how you got to your debut novel. Like, what was your journey? People always want to know that.
I do not remember a time when my life was not about books. When I was a little girl in San Francisco, we had this old school desk that my grandmother, who was a school teacher, had salvaged. And it was like that Charlie Brown style with the lift up top and the little attached chair.
That you could always have dumped out if it were your
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And that was like my office from like age like 2.
Yeah.
So from like when I could sit up and like hold crayons, I was like, I have work to do. I have books to make about Ariel, the Little Mermaid, and My Little Ponies, and how they are all becoming ballerinas together. I have a lot of work to do.
That's great. That was a really good way to prepare yourself for a life writing your first novel during COVID.
Exactly.
You're like, I'm gonna sit here, I'm gonna produce.
Yeah, hey, butt in seat, man, that's what it takes.
Yeah, is that your secret to, so I saw you did the Catapult program.
Yes.
It's a 1-year novel generating program. I've never talked to anyone who did it, and I wanted to hear a little bit about it. How are we doing, how are we doing for time?
We're good. We have like, I don't know, another 5-10 minutes.
Okay, talk a lot about Catapult. No, I wanted to hear, so there's this novel generating program, and this is your first novel, so please tell us how that worked for you.
Yeah,
It worked.
I mean, yeah, it worked great.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I did this year-long course through Catapult Press. Unfortunately, they no longer, I think they shuttered their teaching program, which is a real shame, but I know that the writer who taught my cohort, Lynn Stager-Strong, she still runs novel generators. And so, yeah, it was a year-long novel writing workshop. And she's also a very serious runner, so she brought that like athlete discipline energy to it, which was like, yeah, let's go.
Did she have you marking the beats of the novel, or did that come sort of also from your TV Western sort of study? Because the novel, for those of you who are reading it, it's very well paced, right? We were talking about that. It's a page turner. It's like beat, beat, beat. And you even have it broken down into sort of 3 acts. So did you work on that with them, or that came to you in a different way?
That wasn't really conscious.
Interesting.
I'm a maximalist by nature. I like action. I like stuff to happen.
Yeah.
You know, I have a BA in literature, but not an MFA in writing, because I just like to work in a different way. I want to write fiction that has like where the prose really rocks, but the plot also, let's move, let's do stuff.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I think readers appreciate that.
I like
to be honest.
I like you know, let's have some action and let's have some funny interactions between friends and like you know, I'm one of those, I love watching like a serial drama and watching like the 4th tier subplot of like, ooh, is the piano player ever gonna wind up with the girl who sweeps the floors?
Well, wait a minute. You have a couple of subplots like
exactly.
that.
I love stuff like that.
Yeah, you do. The subplots are really nice. And one of the things we didn't talk about much is that you have this complete cast of characters, right? You've built out the world with people in the saloon. So how did they just come to you? You were like, here's Pierre, is he French-Canadian?
He's French.
French, he's French. How he got there, I don't remember.
Yeah, he's some sort of cool traveling guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would sort of think about like, okay, we need a madam for this brothel. And then I was like, actually, you know what? I want to have 2 madams because I want to have the one who's sort of, Kate is sort of the grande dame, and she's a little past her prime, but it's not an issue. And then she's got her, her co-manager Lila, who's the other madam, and Lila's like the pit boss.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, and then Bridget needs a friend. And so then I created Constance for her, and it was like, we want someone who's going to appreciate her smart alecky impulsiveness, but also be a very different type of person.
Wait, were Kate and Lila lovers?
No.
Oh, I just thought of it. I didn't see it really in the book.
No, they are besties and business partners.
Yeah.
In the same way that like you can wind up like being really good roommates with like a friend of a friend. Like, they're just they work well together.
Yeah.
So then it's like, okay, Bridget needs a friend, so let's create Constance for her.
That was a great subplot. And she's such a good character.
Oh,
I really
thank
liked
you.
her. I mean, she was meant to be likable.
Oh, that's what she's for.
Yeah,
she's for everybody to love.
Yeah.
Guys, your job is to love Constance.
So, just before we end, I wanted to say Out Montclair co-sponsored this event, sponsored the event. And can you talk about the community, maybe if you have support from the queer community, or what that's been like for you?
The support from the queer community has been amazing. I've gotten to work with some really amazing people. Notable examples are like with the Non-Binary and Bike Book Club out of Brooklyn has been hugely supportive. A lot of local bookstores and local queer organizations have boosted Lucky Red. I've been really lucky to be just like received in this wonderful way. Yeah.
Is there a book like yours that you would recommend besides yours? I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm not reading in the right genre, but I don't know a book like this.
I think if you want more tough-talking Western girls, True Grit is the one for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect.
Okay, so thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
And now comes the time when you guys get to ask the questions. So, okay.
Hi, I went, this is for Claudia. I went up on your website and I noticed that you have a collage of like photographs of like books, pictures of dogs, you know. And I noticed that you have a snapshot of the cover of The Crime of Miss Jean Brodie by Muriel Sparks. And I wanted to know, is she one of your favorite writers, and why do you love her book so much, if she is?
I really like Muriel Sparks. I just love how like she's got that like laser precision. She does not waste. She doesn't even waste a space between words, much less a word. Yeah. So those books, like you crack one of her books, and this book is like, "Hi, it's nice to meet you. I know who I am. Let's go." And I really appreciate that.
Are any of these characters based on real people that you found in your research?
They are whole cloth.
Okay.
They're not real historical people from my research, but more like archetypes that I encountered and archetypes that I knew that, like, the Western is a fun genre because it's so tight. Your menu of tropes and archetypes is very short. And in the same way, when you go into a restaurant and they've got a short menu, you're like, oh, this is going to be good. It's like, oh, we can have a lot of fun with this.
Are any of these characters you?
No, God.
I mean, I know, sometimes you can give them your inner life.
Oh, for sure, for
You
sure.
know?
No, I mean,
Yeah.
look, I'm a
Yeah.
novelist, which means I'm working out my
Yeah.
issues in front of you all.
Precisely.
In that sense, yes.
They're
but-
all you.
Yeah, but no, in that sense, I write fiction because I get sick of myself and want to hang out with other people.
Yeah. That's good.
Okay, Claudia's here. She's ready to answer your questions.
Thank you again for being here, and for anyone else who also wants to join our Lit Club, the Queer Lit Club. It's in 2 weeks on June 27th here at the Montclair Library at 6 o'clock. But a question I was thinking about as I was reading it, and I have like 30 pages left, so maybe it'll be answered, I don't know. But the concept of luck throughout the book is just, so I'm curious, what do you think? Do you think luck is something that is in the world, or can people be lucky, or is that just, I don't know.
Oh yeah, I absolutely believe in the concept of luck. I've been on the receiving end of a great deal of it. I think that I agree with people who say that you make your own luck, but I sort of believe everything about luck. I believe that luck favors the prepared. I believe that you can make your own. I believe that it just exists and like lands on people. Yeah, I'm always like throwing salt over my shoulder and like all that stuff. Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think there's like some sort of energy that like flows around in the universe, and luck is one of the forms that it takes.
Or in the case of the dad, sort of,
And ill luck.
always having bad luck.
Yeah, exactly. And then the flip side is, I think we've all encountered somebody like Bridget's father who, like, everything that goes wrong is just, I got unlucky. And it's like, you're unlucky an awful lot, sir.
You must make some bad decisions.
Claudia, thank you so much for being here. The way you talk about your characters is just, obviously you love these people. Did you develop your characters and then put them into situations, or did you kind of start with the action and then develop the characters? I'm just curious how that went.
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. For me, writing is a discovery process. You know, when we talk about some people love to outline. and some people don't, and I'm never more than 10 pages ahead of myself, and I'm also never further ahead character-wise. Like, I don't usually, I'll have at most like 1 or 2 people waiting in the wings, so I know like we gotta get them in here somehow. But it all sort of develops together, and I think like Constance is a great example, where I came up with Constance, Bridget's best friend, because Bridget needed a friend, and she needed somebody who could like mentor her a little bit, but then who Bridget could also take care of in her own funny way. And then you know, the way I came up with Pierre, I was like, I want to give something nice to Constance. I want to give her, you know, a friend with benefits, basically, who is on her intellectual level. That will make her so happy. So let's give her that. And then the fun thing about giving characters nice things is then you can take them away. And that, talk about moving the plot, that was the plot.
Give them nice things and then take them away.
Yeah.
That's a good way to talk about plot and tension. Yeah.
And then as soon as they get something nice, there's always a part of you we've all had this experience, there's a part of you when something good happens to a character that you love in a book or on TV or something, and you're like, I'm so happy for you. I'm so worried.
Or, I'm so happy for you, but I saw that coming.
Yeah.
And there are things in this book that you did not see coming. I promise.
Thank you.
Okay.
What advice do you have for new writers? There's always a writer in the room. There's always a novelist in the room, quietly lurking somewhere.
I would say, think about what you actually like. You know, somebody gave me some wonderful advice when I was very, very early in this process, and they said, there are no guilty pleasures, there are only pleasures. And the way that I arrived at this book was starting by thinking about Spartanly, and the way I started thinking about Spartanly was thinking like, all right, at the very base, what do I really, really like every time? And it's like, and it was as simple as, I like stories about cool people who do awesome shit. And so then I was like, all right, who's the coolest person who can do the awesomest shit? And so like, go to like, what can you absolutely not look away from? What are you just like, yeah, guitar solo, drive all night, let's rock and roll. And like, that's where your seat is.
Is that your next book? Guitar solo, drive all night.
I mean, my favorite movie is Mad Max Fury Road, so maybe.
Oh, there you go. Anything's possible.
Anything's possible.
I was just going to ask you as the last question, I was going to take it since no one else seems to want one. Do you have another work in progress?
Sort of yes and no. There's plenty of stuff that I'm sort of nosing at gently, like when I think about like my dog when she goes and pokes in the leaves to see if today there might be a rabbit in there. I'm playing with some stuff, but nothing that fits into a succinct blurb yet.
Okay, well, we'll look for your elevator speech later.
Thank you.
In the meantime, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much